But what do I give it as a score? I don't know. I don't
Maybe
know.
I'll come to you at a later date.
Yeah, maybe we'll have to revisit. Maybe not talk about it.
Maybe just not talk about this movie for a little while. Go and have a chamomile tea and sit in a dark corner. But like, yeah.
Welcome back, everybody. My name is Phil Marriott. We are Boys on Film. Here's Sean Vickers.
Hi, Phil. Hi, everyone.
How are you after watching this film that we're about to review?
I am that cringe emoji. It's all teeth. Like, it was brilliant, Phil. Yeah, so for anyone viewing, any viewers or who tune into this regularly, you'll know that I'm not a horror fan.
No.
And every once in a while, Phil says, this isn't a horror, you'll be fine, it's some psychological movie, just watch it. And then I just watch Violation.
It's pretty extreme. And I would say, actually, I'll do a little warning at the beginning of this. If you're into horror, but you can't tolerate the really extreme, graphic, gory horror, or horrors, then this is probably not going to be for you, because it does teeter over the boundaries to quite an extent. Does it not, Sean?
Teeter over the boundaries is such an understatement.
I think this is going to be one of those films, one of those horror films that is always in those top 10 lists of the most disturbing horror films. You know, you see like people talking about Audition. There are some horrors that people will always reference in these lists, and I think this is going to be one of those in future horror film.
It's unflinching, let's put it that way. Like
Really
it's something else. I'm in a weird way, I'm kind of happy that I got through it. And yeah, it kind of lulls you into a false sense of security in a way, because you start to watch it and you go, oh, this is quite art house. And then it's not.
You're right, because at the
Totally
beginning,
not.
you have that score, you have like this Baroque classical score, which does sound really ominous anyway. I mean, it does sound quite brutal and quite scary. But the opening shot, you see the aerial shot of the car driving through the woods, and you know straight away that there's going to be something pretty unpleasant.
And then you've got this wolf eating a dead rabbit, and you're all like, ooh, what's going on here then? And then you're kind of eased into the storyline, which is, and we'll get into the structure of it, 'cause it chronologically it's kind of fractured. I think they do that for effect to kind of make the middle of the film, which should be the end of the film, incredibly powerful.
Yeah, because it does shift back and forwards, doesn't it? Which can be a little bit confusing, I guess, if you're not really thinking about it. But you mentioned the tone of the film, though. I mean, visually, it reminded me a little bit of Lars von Trier, what he's done, especially with the shots of the wildlife. You know, you see like close-ups of flies dying and...
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because in my reference notes, which I have here, because as you all know, I'm a granny and I can't remember anything. In my reference notes, I had written, it reminded me of the house that Jack built.
Yes,
which I watched in the 2018 movie, which another one which I watched. And when I watched this, I was like, oh, this is just like the house that Jack built, which is really unflinching and horrible.
Yeah, and a bit like Antichrist, Lars von Trier's Antichrist.
And a bit like Antichrist. I love von Trier. I love the Dogma 95 manifesto. I love Thomas Vinterberg. I love all that. So I was like, I'm going to watch this because I love him. And it was horrible.
Yeah.
But I was like, it's part of his kind of canon, and I need to just work through it. Yeah, this non-linear approach I find really interesting, because I think as a device, it is overdone at times as a way of creating interest. But I think for me, there's two big things that happen. And by changing the structure of the film in this way, they sit back to back. And so you get cause and effect literally straight after each other, and both are quite big things that happen, which I think is really clever. And so it's like the shape of the movie is like this, and so the big thing doesn't happen at the end, the big thing happens in the middle, and you kind of then just reel off it right through till the end. That was in my mind anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And it does, it's almost like it pulls the rug from you, and you do slip up not expecting what you're watching. But we should say it's a Canadian drama stroke horror film, directed and written by Madeline Sims Fewer and Dusty Mancinelli. I think they met a few years ago. They've done a couple of shorts together. They've done one short about child abuse, which I think is called Chubby. But this is their first feature. So, I mean, I have to say from the start, an impressive feature debut. It's a really powerful piece. It's called Violation. Do you want to set the scene, Sean?
Sure. I can set the scene. I'd love to set the scene about this movie, which was just like a big warm hug. So basically, it follows the story of Miriam and her husband Caleb. They're on the rocks, and they're going to see Miriam's sister Greta at their home, and it all kind of sets the scene and tells the story of them, meeting. It starts off very, very innocuous and very kind of like clearly Miriam and Greta have had an upbringing. They're very tight as sisters. Greta's husband is called Dylan, and really the story revolves around the four of them, and really what happens over the course of a few nights, which becomes really quite problematic and questionable.
Yeah, and I guess
stop there.
a lot of the problems of their relationships, both couples, surface as well, and you get the two sisters talking about the problems in their relationships. Not so much Greta's part, but more Miriam's, because Miriam's having problems with her husband. They haven't had sex for a long time, and there are problems with their communication. There's a scene where you see Caleb in the shower, and he doesn't respond to her conversation, and she's like, why aren't you talking to me? What's happening? This is all a bit weird. It's all fractured, isn't it? Their friendship, their relationship, it's breaking down.
And I think it's an interesting film because you have this and you're viewing it as you're watching the movie and you're seeing this unravel and you're going, that's not in a good place. You can just sense it. And then there's a bonfire, there's some late night drinking, things start to happen across the two couples. I'll leave that kind of there. But it's a film that's really tinged in sadness and pain. Yeah. I don't feel like in some of these films like this, there's kind of a revenge redemption. And I didn't get revenge redemption. I just got like, God, there's so much pain and misery in this film.
But you mentioned that scene with Dylan and Miriam around the fireplace, and there's a really interesting conversation they're having about how dark people can be, and not everybody is an angel. And I think he says something along the lines of, there are people who are Hitlers and there are people who are Christ, and it's which path you decide to go down. Words to that effect. And it's basically what he's hinting at is that, you choose to be the better person.
The thing that kind of sat with me initially is, and we're probably talking in riddles for the viewers, so I do apologise, but between this action that happens, then there is, and this impact, this kind of this recourse. And I was like, she was so calculated and planned and cold that in my head, I was like, oh, I don't get it. There's a disconnect in the story. But actually, on reflection, I think what has happened is because they have done this non-linear storyline and put the two big actions next to each other, what it does is it removes who knows what period of time where something is stewing or kind of simmering, and a build-up of anger and aggression towards another person. And so when you take that out of the movie and you put the two things next to each other, it kind of blows you away a bit, because you're like, I appreciate what's happened, but this is the response. And the response just seems so drastic. And it's because I think it's the way it's laid out, because there would have been a period of time in the middle of that, in a linear storyline, where you would see all of these emotions and behaviors building, which gets you to that response, and they just remove it. And actually, I think it's really clever.
Absolutely. And you see the sister, Greta, you see her having a conversation and that relationship breaking down a little bit as well, because obviously these two sisters love each other. But Greta, is implying, she's saying to Miriam that, in the past, you've always been this person who craves attention and pretends to be the victim. And of course, you've seen that play out where she does become a victim, but in her head, she must be kind of thinking of all these things that she's heard in the past, and people kind of saying that she's the bad person in a sense. Whereas what happens in this film, she's not at all. But it must be that whole kind of psychological torment as well that she's had in the past that makes her question what kind of person she is. But there are lines in this film as well. Dylan says to her, we fucked up, you were emotionally vulnerable. And again, it's like all this stuff that's being piled on her.
For me, the most important relationship in the film is the sisters. In some ways, Miriam wants to rely on Greta, and she's the person she trusts the most, and she refers back to them living together previously. She clearly, Greta has been a massive part of Miriam's life. They now live apart. There's revelations that Miriam makes to Greta, and Greta doesn't respond the way that Miriam expects. Greta sides with her husband, and I think that really hurts and damages Miriam, and that carries through. And I also think some of the acts that are undertaken, some of the quite graphic acts that are undertaken, in my mind, Miriam is not only thinking about herself, she's thinking, this is the person that's with my sister.
Yeah.
Which I think further fuels just this kind of unflinching acts of violence. And so a lot of it, I think, is her relationship with her sister and where she feels she's at. You know, I think she feels wronged by Greta at one point. And it all sits together. Really, I think she just wants, in some way, she just wants to be with her sister.
She obviously wants that love and commitment from her husband, which she's not getting. She wants that trust and loyalty from her sister, and that's breaking down. So in a way, I would imagine she's feeling lonely, and she's feeling like she's not understood by anybody around her. But it's interesting how that relationship does change throughout the film. You kind of think, I mean, you know from the start when she arrives at her sister's, and Greta says to her, "Are you okay?" And she's obviously clearly not okay. She's very one-word answers, and Greta kind of knows that there's something wrong. But there's so much there. I mean, it's a really complex relationship, and there's a complex past, and we get to see that. But yeah, I mean, you mentioned that the violence in this film, unflinching, very much so. It doesn't shy away from anything. It does stuff that, I mean, even me as a hardened horror fan, I felt so anxious watching this film. I'm feeling anxious now just talking about it, because there are scenes that I just wanted to fast forward through. I didn't want to see what we saw, and it is very extreme, because I guess they want to show you the nasty stuff, because that's what the characters are going through.
We talk about I don't love horror, but some of those scenes, it's not the jumpy horror, and because the camera doesn't flinch, it doesn't budge, the camera just stays on a scene and you're watching something happening. And also there's none of that kind of like violins jumpy, it's just on it.
Yeah.
So there's something stark about it, and I think it happened in the house that Jack built. That's the last film I can refer it to, because you're just watching something going, they've actually just shown it. Like, there's no camera panning away. They're not alluding to something. You're just watching it. And that's a bit like, if you think way back to something like Requiem for a Dream, like you think about the last 10 minutes of that film, which I would never want to watch the film ever again. But like, it's so unflinching, and you're working through something and the camera doesn't budge. It's just like you're going to take everything in. And that's what this film does. You're watching some scenes that are so calculated. You think about, because what you're going through your head is like the amount of planning that needs to be undertaken by the protagonist to be able to do what she does is also equally frightening, because it's planned to such like precision that the mental process to go through and go, this is something I'm going to do, I think is equally frightening.
And also the filmmaking itself as well, because the camera work is very shaky. Certain scenes are very shaky, almost like you're really there. It feels like you're really there, part of that conversation. And the conversation, again, is very real. It feels like we're almost eavesdropping on conversations, or we're there like a fly on the wall. And it does feel very, very uncomfortable, even being part of that conversation. I mean, that, again, is quite horrific in some ways, because you feel that tension. And to some extent, I think that's clever filmmaking, because you feel like you're going through that it's a very powerful piece. You feel like you're feeling all those feelings, that you're feeling like that tension. And obviously a lot of it you wouldn't know how that feels unless you've gone through that experience. But another thing that I found quite shocking, and I'm not a prude by any means, but there's one scene which I found shocking in the sense that an erection is showed, because I'm sure there are laws where you can't show that on screen. I guess they used prosthetics. Because I did notice at the beginning of the film, special effects credits came up, and I thought, oh, okay, I didn't think it was going to be this kind of film. And I guess, along with other scenes that they do show, which we can't talk about, which are very graphic, that's why the special effects team came in. Maybe it was a special effect.
don't know.
Did you find that shocking?
Well, I mean, there's an erect penis in the film.
Yeah.
Right,
Which you
just for
don't
the
always
viewers.
see in feature films.
And
You never
and
see
it's
in
kind of
feature-
reference, and they're talking about the erect penis. Like, it's not like it's like a whisper of a penis. You've got an erect penis on camera for
Yeah.
a decent period of time. I don't know. This actually, there's a bigger question around erect penises. It's probably another conversation, but there's been a normalization, I think, on TV and film over the last maybe 5 years of you see more penises than you ever saw before, ever.
Yeah.
And I think this was but this is the most, I don't know, real experience of a penis on camera, which is not porn.
Exactly,
You know what I mean?
and I
It's
just
like
wonder whether that was used because we're not used to seeing that. So in a way, that is shocking, and I wonder if the filmmakers were wanting to shock because it's meant to be that kind of story, because it is an extremely shocking story. And I just wonder if that was an element of that, which I find quite interesting because we're just not used to seeing that, and maybe that's the point, because it's not discussed enough. Maybe this isn't discussed enough in its brutal entirety, you know, and it is an incredibly nasty situation that people
But
do.
you know what, Phil? It's a really interesting construct, because we've talked before about films and what shocks people, and it wouldn't surprise me if this film gets complaints because of the penis, but not about what is one of the most horrific pieces of footage I've ever seen on, you know, that's the thing that should shock, because you're like, oh my God, that's fundamentally awful. But I guarantee you that you will get complaints because of the penis. And I think it's the way that we are built, or it's the way that we process information. Like I say, I feel like the penis has become normalized.
Yeah.
It sounds like an essay I'm writing.
Yeah.
I feel like the penis is becoming more normalized in film, but it is still shocking. And in some ways, we're giving it equal weight to something that happens in a film, which is, you know, unflinchingly awful.
And also there's that question that I'm sure a lot of people will want to talk about as well, that whole discussion piece about, you know, the bad things that people do. And there are bad things in this film that people do, and Miriam does bad things. But we have to say that what is so grim is the violation itself. That is the grim thing. It wasn't an enjoyable experience watching this film, I have to say. And these films that I've seen in the past, you know, that I think about. I think of Martyrs, and I think it's a film that I still think about even now, years down the line. I still think how disturbing and how powerful it is. An incredibly powerful piece of cinema, and I think this is. I can't put a score on it though. I can't put a score on this.
My score has gone up as the week has gone on.
Because you've thought about it more, because it's lingered, or
because I've thought about it more. Initially I was just like, okay, for me it's flawed. My initial takeaway from it was it's flawed. I've gone through this story and I've got gaps in the story, and then what I've thought about is this film is so considered those gaps are deliberate, and then I thought, why are the gaps deliberate? And then I thought to myself, it's the way the film has been put together. It's that non-linear. I'm putting cause and effect next to each other, and that's the thing where I was like, actually, on reflection, that's cleverer than I initially took away, and that's more. But again, I've also took this film away and thought about it, which I think also give it. I still don't love the movie, but it will stay with me.
And I said to you before we filmed this, I said I can't put words into how I feel about this film because it stayed with me, but I still can't really discuss it properly because I'm still asking myself questions.
When we were chatting offline, you were a bit like gobsmacked by it.
Yeah.
And so look, I'm a hard marker, so it's never going to get up there, but it deserves recognition, and I do think it sits in some genre. But again, I think it straddles so many different things, this movie. And again, it's not your classic revenge redemption movie either. So if you're thinking that that's this kind of movie, it's not that either. It does something else. It's much more emotional. It's much more visceral. It's much deeper.
And we have to say Madeleine Sims-Fewer, who plays Miriam, she's the writer and the director, obviously alongside Dusty Mancinelli as well. But again, incredible when you think about it. She's starring in it, she's written it, she's directed it, co-written it, co-directed. I really don't know what to say other than what we've said. It reminded me of other things, but then it stood out on its own for other reasons. It was uncompromising. It was brutal. It made me think. It stayed with me. But yeah, what do I give it as a score? I don't know.
Maybe I'll come to you at a later date.
Yeah, maybe we'll have to revisit. Maybe not talk about it.
Maybe just not talk about this movie for a little while. Go and have a chamomile tea and sit in a dark corner. But but thanks so much, Phil. I look forward to your next horror recommendation that you sent.
It's funny because as I was watching it, I kept thinking, "Oh, Sean, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." And I'm surprised you got through it. To be completely honest, I'm quite gobsmacked that you did actually finish it in one piece mentally.
We got through. It just made me. It's just because my brain was doing lots of other things. Like it was like the output. I was like, okay, but why? There's lots of whys going on, and that's kind of kept me going.
We've not done it before, but let's do a Disney film next time, maybe. Should we do a Pixar?
I think Disney films are even worse.
It's good to see you, Sean. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you to everybody watching, and like it if you've liked this film. We'd be really interested to hear what you think about it if you do get around to seeing it. I think it's on Shudder, available digitally, obviously, in April, but all the details are down below. And yeah, let us know what you think about it.